Hello and welcome to this INVIS special training on how to connect and use geospatial files. My name is Sophie Sparks. I'm part of the Tableau Public team and I'm based here in London. So from me, hope you're all having a great afternoon, and depending on where in the world you're dialing in from, I hope you're having a good morning or a good evening as well. Just before we get started, I'll just let you know, you'll see on the screen that I've got a link up, bit.ly/INVIS geospatial training, all one word, all lowercase. Feel free to go and download the files from this bit.ly link. There'll be one Excel file and two shape files. They're what we'll be covering today. If you want to just watch the webinar, it's being recorded, and we'll send an email out later on this evening with the link to the same link, also a link to the recording and any other material I mentioned during the webinar. So if you just want to watch what we're doing, that's fine as well. You'll notice that you're all on mute, and that's not because I don't want to hear from you. If you do have any questions, please enter them into the chat box or the Q&A box, and either myself or my colleague Jade, who's also dialed in, will answer them for you. So if you see an answer from a lovely lady called Jade Levan, she's my Tableau Public colleague based in the Paris office, who's very kindly offered to join and help answer questions from me during this webinar. What we're going to look at in the next half an hour is we're going to have a look at a data set that's looking at the CO2 emission rates for the London boroughs and also for different territories within England over the last few years. So we'll have a look at the data. We'll then go through to connecting to the data to Tableau, and then how we can join a geospatial file onto that. So in this case, we'll be having a look at mapping out London boroughs. We'll then jump into Tableau and actually create a map using our geospatial file and our data. I'll then go and show you how you can join on additional spatial files, so you can join more than one spatial file together. And I'll explain a little bit around the join types. And lastly, I'll have a look at some map options, some of the options you have in Tableau to format your maps. If you aren't already familiar with INVIS, INVIS is a fantastic competition that Tableau runs. We have 3 feeder competitions. So this is the first one. We'll be running another one in May and another one in June or July. And the winner of each of those 3 feeder competitions has a chance to viz live on stage at TC17, our Tableau's big annual conference in Vegas this year, to battle it out to be the INVIS champion. So it's a fantastic competition with a brilliant prize. It's a all-expense trip and accommodation and tickets to TC17 happening in Vegas. So the point of this training, this INVIS competition, this first one anyway, is you can visualize anything you like, but you have to use a spatial file. So we'll have a look at how to connect to those. But if you don't enter the INVIS competition, how to connect to spatial files is a brilliant new skill and feature that's come out in Tableau 10.2, and love for you to give it a try anyway. So let's get started. The first thing we will do is we'll have a look at our data set, just dragging it onto the screen now. This data set looks at various different types of various different activities that emit CO2, and it's looking at those emissions. So we've got industrial and commercial, domestic, transport, and then we've got CO2 emissions per capita for various different, for the 32 different boroughs in London. So for here at the moment we can see City of London, and if I scroll all the way down, we'll have a look, see there are many other boroughs in here. I'm just going to scroll to the very bottom of this data set because we not only do we have the London boroughs in here, we also have the four different countries that make up Great Britain, England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. And we also have these areas, southwest, for instance, northeast. We have different areas within the UK. So we can map all of these things out because we have a unique identifying mapping code here that we can download a spatial file for and connect and map that. So I'll just scroll back up to the top. I've already prepared this data, so it's formatted in a way that's Tableau, works well with Tableau. So namely, I've pivoted it around to make sure each individual year is in one column. So now we've got a bit of an idea of what the data is we're looking at. Let's go ahead and grab Tableau Public. And this process is exactly the same if you're using Tableau Desktop Personal or Desktop Professional. And let's go ahead and connect to our data. So my data set is in an Excel file. So I'll just go ahead and navigate to it and open it up. And it was in my data table. So while Tableau loads my data, it's on that very quickly. We can have a look and see that it all looks fine. Yep, it looks just like it did in Excel. So now we can go ahead and grab our first spatial file. The spatial file I'm going to be using is one I Googled. I searched for London Borough spatial file. That's the exact search term I used, and found a spatial file on the london.gov.uk data store site. I will just drag, this onto screen to show you. A few questions I've had come through recently is how do I find spatial files and what are they? So we'll just have a look at that right now. So this was the original Google query I did, London Borough spatial file. I'm sure you could improve that with some advanced Google search to make it a little bit more specific. But the first thing that came up was statistical GIS boundary files for London from the data.london.gov.uk data store. So go ahead and open that up. So with Tableau 10.2, you can now connect directly to Esri shapefiles, KML files, map info tables, and GeoJSON files. So if I go across here and have a look at this, it says statistical GIS boundaries, and when I download this, I see it's a shapefile. Now, when you download statistical files, they're normally zipped. It's in a zip file. You can't connect the zipped file to Tableau. You need to unzip the file first. So I'll just show you what this looks like. So when I downloaded the file, it was zipped up like this. I simply unzipped the file, and I've saved it in the same place that my data set was, just to make it a bit easier for me. But you can connect to the folder, but you can't connect to the zipped up spatial file. So just remember when you download them to unzip your spatial files. Great, let's jump back into Tableau and grab that spatial file we just saw. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new data set. So in Tableau 10.2, on the upper left-hand corner next to the connections, you have the option to add additional data sets. So if I go ahead and hit add, it takes me back to the add a connection page, pane, and this time I want to connect to a spatial file. So I'll go ahead and click on spatial file, and here are those two unzipped files I have. Now the first one I'm connecting to is my London boroughs, so I'll just double click, and when you unzip a spatial file, it has multiple files in there. That's fine, keep them all together in your folder. When you connect to Tableau, you'll only be able to see, if you're using an Esri shapefile, the .shp shapefile. If you're using a KML file, this will be a .kml file. So I'll just go ahead and open that exactly the same way as I opened up my Excel file to start with. And now you can see Tableau has added, I've got two data sets here. If you look at the upper left-hand corner, I have my carbon emissions borough Excel file in blue, and under that in orange, I have my spatial file, the London Boroughs spatial file. And when you so now I've got my data and I'm joining my spatial file onto it. Now when you join any two data sets or more data sets together in Tableau, you get this option to start with. This is where you define how you want the join to happen. Now, your first option is always an inner join. We'll go ahead and use that right now, and then after we've made our first map, I'll come back and I'll attach a second spatial file, one that looks at the regions within England, and we'll have a little look at what is going on with our joins. And I've got a few questions coming in. Hopefully Jade will be able to answer them for you, and if not, I will go ahead and answer them at the end of this webinar. So when you join two data sets together, you have to join on a field that is exactly the same. And when I say exactly the same, I mean case sensitive, number for number, letter for letter, exactly the same. So in my Excel file, I have that field called code. Remember, we had a look at it, and some of them started with like capital E, and then they had a string of numbers. And in my London Borough spatial file, I've got a few fields. One of them's called GSS code. I'm going to connect with that one. You can always try opening up a spatial file in a text editor, such as Notepad, just to see what it looks like. And you can see here, joining code to GSS code. So I now have my, in blue, original data. Here's my code for my City of London. And if I go across, I can see my name, City of London, is the same, and my code, E09000001, is exactly the same. So Tableau has joined every instance it sees this code in my Excel file. It will connect and join that data from my geospatial file. And the field we want here that will be able to map is this field on my furthest left called geometry. And by default, Tableau already recognizes that this is a spatial file, and it gives it this little globe symbol, which means we'll be able to map it. Currently, Tableau spatial files can connect to polygons files. If you have multiple kinds of spatial files types, so polygon, let's say, and line, mixed together in one shapefile, Tableau won't be able to connect to that yet. That's a sort of more advanced thing, and if you have any questions, please do feel free to either tweet me at Sophie Sparks or email the Tableau Public team, and we can answer those questions for you. That email address is public, P-U-B-L-I-C, @tableau.com, and I can put it into the chat box or the Q&A box afterwards. So let's go ahead and build a map. Sorry, that might have seemed like a long way to start, and I know everyone always wants to jump in and build the data, but having a sound understanding of how your data is structured and how to connect your spatial file to your data really helps you get started. So let's go ahead and see what the average CO2 emissions by transport are around the London boroughs. So the first thing I'm going to do is double click on that geometry field. It's down here under my measures. If I just double click on it, Tableau automatically builds a map for me. So here are all the boroughs in London. I'm just going to minimize the show me bar to make it a little easier for you to see what's going on. Now if I hover my map over, hover my mouse over this map, we can see, even though I can see each borough has a distinct line around it, if I move my mouse over, Tableau's treating this whole spatial file as one unit. So I've got my mouse over here in the sort of upper left-hand, one of the upper left-hand boroughs in London. I don't know which one this is. My London geography is still pretty poor. And if I move my mouse off, all of the boroughs unhighlight. Now, what Tableau's doing here is it's aggregating this spatial file. So it's treating it at the highest possible geographic view it can, and that view is all of London. So if I wanted to get information about each individual borough, I need to add that to the level of detail. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my borough name and drag this down onto level of detail under my marks tile and just drop it down there. I'm also going to grab my code just for reference, and I'll drag this onto my detail as well. So now I've broken my data into this smallest unit possible. The smallest unit shown in this map is individual borough, and so I've added those onto the level of detail. Now if I move my mouse over the map, I can see each borough, I can see the name for that, and I can see if I hover my mouse over one borough, only that borough highlights. Now what I was going to do is see which borough in London is responsible on average for the most CO2 emissions. So I'm going to filter down and only look at my transport emissions, and let's go ahead and add my value to color. I want my average CO2 emissions, and I can see that Hillingdon, a London borough in the sort of northwest of London, on average over all the years in this data set produces 622 kilotons of carbon dioxide. Now when I first looked at this, I completely did not expect this. I assumed that the City of London, which is this little borough here in the middle, would produce the most CO2. That's probably because the Tableau office is situated sort of around the centre of London and traffic's appalling. But as I see in this data set, what I see is actually a fraction of where all the CO2 emissions are coming around London. So now we've got one map, and I'm going to go ahead and just rename this London boroughs. I said, well, what do we want to do if we wanted to map two different geographies within this data set? So remember, we had the London boroughs, and we also had our different regions within the UK, as well as the 4 countries that make up the UK and the UK as a whole. So if I go back to my data source, and I can do that just by clicking on this data source tab in the lower left-hand side, I can go back to this original sheet. Now I want to add I can now zoom in and see how much CO2 has been emitted by each London borough, but I want to compare see how London compares emission-wise for transport emissions compared to all of England, because I saw we have that information in this data set as well. So I'll go ahead and add a new spatial file, exactly the same way we added the London boroughs. I'll click Add, Spatial File, and I'll go back, and I've got this UK regions. These are the regions as defined in the 2011 census. And again, I just found these by Googling them. I'll click Open, and we can see here is my second spatial file. Tableau is added in green. And again, I need to define how I'm going to join. So I can join my code in my Excel file to my geocode in my regions data set. And now something strange has happened. I'll just minimize that join. All of a sudden, I can't see any data down here in the preview pane. And if I jump back to my London boroughs map that I made before by clicking on the tab, we can see my map has disappeared. So what's going on here? Well, what you're doing is all about the joins. So we're asking Tableau to do the impossible. We're asking it to join our data set and inner join to the London boroughs. And what an inner join does is it only keeps the data that is in both files. So we're saying only keep the data that is in our original data set and is a London borough. But at the same time, we're asking Tableau to do the impossible, and we're saying additionally only keep the data that we have in our original data set and this regions file. Now those two things are mutually exclusive. We can either map the London boroughs with an inner join, or we can tell Tableau to map the regions. So how do we get around this? What we need to do is we need to change our join. So if I go ahead and click on the join and say, this time give me all the data, give me everything that is in the left, that is in the data set on the left, which is our Excel file. So give me the entire Excel file back. And then when it's a London borough, connect on the London borough data set. And let's do the same with this region. So let's say, give me all the data in our Excel file that included the London boroughs and the regions. And if we see it's a region, connect on this data set here. And so now we can see we've got our data back. And if I look, Barking and Dagenham is a London borough. And I can see here in blue, we've got our Excel data set. In green, this is our regions. And because this is a London borough, it has no region geospatial data to connect to it. But we do have in yellow our London borough data set geospatial file. And if I scroll all the way down, and I'll probably have to show all the data in this file, and this may take a second, but now we'll see when this loads. I might have been a bit over hasty with 13,000 rows, but we'll see that we'll be able to, just as we saw if we have a London borough, we only are connecting to London borough data. We can see here, North East, North West, Yorkshire and Humber. These are regions in England, and we can see when we have a region, we've connected on our region spatial file, and we have no data for the London borough spatial file. So let's go back to our map and have a look at what this looks like. So if I click back onto my London borough map, you can see a map's there, but it's looking a little different. So why is this? Although my map's here and I can see each of my boroughs, I've got this weird washed out color, and we can see our CO2 emissions. Remember the first time we saw that CO2 emissions in Hillingdon, that was the highest at 622 kilotons. We're now looking at 128,897 kilotons. So what's going on? Well, we are now showing two different levels of mapping. So Tableau is trying to show the range of CO2 emissions for London, which went from 57 to 622, and also for all of England, which obviously goes up to 128,897 kilotons. And the trick we can see for this is if I look in my bottom left-hand corner of my map, I can see I have some nulls. So what this is showing me, this didn't show up the first time we mapped our London borough, and that's because we used an inner join and we only were keeping the data for London boroughs from our Excel data set and our shapefile. Now we've got some extra geography hanging out here in effect. So if I click on this nulls, I can say filter this data down, so just filter out all the null values. And we can see now I've got this longitude generated filter up here. And now my map looks the same. Hillingdon has the highest number of CO2 emissions for transport at 622 kilotons. So what we've done is we've just filtered out all the England regions that we aren't showing on this map. And why aren't we showing them on this map? Because this map is only mapping London boroughs. We can do the same thing and have a look at the England regions. I'll open up a new sheet. This time I'm going to double click on my England region geometry. And Tableau will draw, here's England, here are all the regions. Again, I need to break them down into the lowest mapping level we have. So I'll add the label, which is the name, and the code to the level of detail, just so I can see both. And now we can see each region within England. And I'll go ahead and add some data to this. And again, we see what is this weird washed out color that's happening. And again, what it's trying to do is it's trying to map a lot of different geographies that we don't have in our data set. So it's mapping all of England, and it's trying to double map our London, because remember, we've got London boroughs and all of England. So again, I look at this little null box, I click on that, I filter my data out, and we can see we've filtered out the geographies that don't map the, so we filtered out our London borough geographies, and here now we can see within the, we can see data for the whole of England. So that's how you connect to a spatial file, and also how you can connect to multiple spatial files if your data set has multiple different levels of mapping shown within it. And also hopefully explains what happens when you join multiple spatial files or multiple files together into the same analysis, and also shows you this little trick of how to get rid of geographies that aren't currently being shown on your map. So what we've just done on this map is we've filtered out all those latitudes and longitudes that made up our London borough data set. And if I go back to my London boroughs, this filter here filters out all the England region geographies that we're not showing because we're mapping our London boroughs. Lastly, we're just on time, so I want to show you very quickly where you can look at your mapping options. If I click on Map and go to my map layers, here are my options for how I want my map to look. You can also connect to a Mapbox map. But in this one, I'm looking at a normal view, and I've got my base, land cover, streets, state and provinces, and country region border names on. If I wanted to change this, for instance, I maybe didn't want to see my land cover, and I don't want to see my base, so I just want to have the roads on a white background, I can change how my map looks by selecting which layers I want to show, and also saying if I want this to be a normal, dark, or light background. There's some really great tips out there written by the community on how to format your maps. So if you are interested in this, please do go ahead and check out either the community forums or just Google. There's some really great blog posts written by community members, mapping, formatting, and in Tableau. So we're just on time. We've gone through a few different things today, and I'm just going to put some of these links I've gone through into the chat box for you. So we had a look at how to tackle your geospatial analysis. If you want to work through the example we did, please wait for the follow-up email, which will include a link to the data sets we've just been through. And if you are somebody who learns better by reading, all the process we've just been through is outlined in this blog post on the Tableau Public page. I'll go ahead and put that into the chat box. If you're interested in IronViz and you'd want to, we're accepting submissions until 11:29 p.m. this Sunday, Seattle time, Pacific Standard Time, which for me in London is 8 hours behind where I am in London. So please do check out a time zone converter to make sure 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, the 26th of May, Seattle time, to figure out what time that is wherever you are based. But I'll put the link to our IronViz contest in the chat box as well. And if you are interested in IronViz and want to learn a little bit more about it, in the follow-up email, I'll also include some great resources we have for IronViz. We have some interviews with our last 3 years' worth of winners, and also for some inspiration on what people have done in the past, I'll send through the links to all the vizes people have submitted for our 3 IronViz contests last year. So we're just on time, so if you have to leave, it's been lovely having you join me on this webinar today. But if you do have any last questions that Jade hasn't managed to answer, I'll put myself on mute for a second and just give you guys time to type them into the chat box or the Q&A box. Sorry. Hi. It looks like Jade has done her usual amazing job and has been answering everybody's questions, which is fantastic. She puts me to shame with her brilliant responses and quick typing. Last thing I said I'd give you was the email address if you do have any questions about mapping to send it to. That's public@tableau.com. I'll just enter that into the chat box. So please do feel free to email us any general questions you have around mapping in Tableau Public. And if you have any questions related to IronViz competition in particular, please send them through. We've got a dedicated email address for IronViz just to make sure we answer those quickly. I know people usually like that we can answer their questions very quickly if they're having any problems lodging their entries. But we've got an email address, public-contestants@tableau.com, and I'll just enter that into the chat box and Q&A box as well. And that public contestants email address is only if you're having questions around IronViz, although those questions could also be about mapping in this case. So thank you so much for joining. Another question that's just come through. Somebody's asking about the, just to say what the differences and what all the file types are again that you can connect to. Esri shapefiles, KML files, map info files, and GeoJSON. Esri files, the file types produced from mapping ArcGIS software. KML files are the types of files that you'll get if you export from Google Maps. GeoJSON files are a JSON file format to map geography, and map info files are, you often find map info files on government websites mapping out various territories within a country, for instance, election areas, electoral voting areas, or state territories. If you do have more questions about those, please do feel free to Google them or to email us and we can give you a bit more detail. There's also a little bit covered in this link to tackle your geospatial analysis with ease in Tableau 10.2 blog post. And we also have some links on the Geospatial blog post and the IronViz page for where you can go to have a look for spatial files. But as you saw I did earlier, just by Googling an area you would like to map and putting shapefile at the end, it's always a good place to start. Great. So we're kept you a few minutes over time. I'm conscious that everyone's probably having a very busy end of their week. If we haven't managed to answer any of your questions and you do have any of them, please do email us. Would love to hear from you, and I really hope that some of you have been inspired to submit a Viz visualization to IronViz. Can't wait to see. We've got all the judging next week, and it's I'm always astounded by the absolute amazing work that the community, that people put together. So thank you so much for joining. And from me in London, hope you have a good afternoon. And depending where in the world you've dialed in from, I hope you're having a good morning or a good evening as well. Thank you so much.